Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast. I'm here with Adam Old Man Winters. I'm Joe Gould, and we're looking at, I don't know if you call this a cult classic or not, but no one probably remembers what it is. It's The Curse of Frankenstein by Hammer Film.
I kept looking for men in suits, rubber suits. I didn't catch any in this movie. We sure we're on the right podcast.
Ha ha ha. You know, you can only take so much kaiju before you need a break.
I don't know.
This is
Just look
this
at
is
how
great.
long the Power Rangers show has been on TV.
But does anyone watch it
That's a good question.
anymore?
Apparently people do, but I don't know. It's like people who go to Long John Silver's. I know what happens, but I don't know if I can truly prove it. I like Long John Silver's too.
I can't remember the last time that I had Long John Silver's or Captain D's.
They're still around.
Well, Burger King is too, but who goes to Burger King?
Fair enough. I'll give you that. Maybe it's all delivered with Burger King.
If we're being fair, also, like all the fast food restaurants, at least the in-store experience have gone crap.
Oh, that is
Possible
true.
exception of Chick-fil-A. Possible exception of Chick-fil-A, but the line's so long, I just refuse to go in.
It moves fast around here. Those lines are in and out.
I eat Chick-fil-A via DoorDash, and it's like 2 miles down the road. So it always gets here in like 5 minutes. Because you think about this, DoorDashers, there's probably 5 of them just living in the Chick-fil-A parking lot. Like, I never have to wait for that food.
I will never bring myself to DoorDash fast food. Mark my words.
Well, I don't pay. I pay for the monthly thing, so I just have to pay for the tip. I'm not getting the
all right.
the charge on top.
You got to feed that
And
family any way you can.
Chick-fil-A was actually part of a lawsuit, and I think they lost. They had raised their prices on the DoorDash app. So basically, they made a point that their prices are the same on the app as they are in the store. If you're telling me that I could pay someone $5 to deliver my Chick-fil-A, so I don't have to stand in, whether the line's moving or not, I don't have to stand in some amusement park ride to get my chicken, I'll take it.
I'm an inside the store guy myself. I will park and go in to get that food.
Well, like I said, Chick-fil-A is probably fine, but all the other fast food restaurants, it's just sticky and dirty.
Speaking of sticky and dirty, my driver's side window, I have a hard time getting it to roll back up. That's why I go inside to get the food.
Not for a new car. Or new to you car.
Yeah.
Well, this is my second podcast in 2 days.
Oh.
I do not know the order of operations in terms of when it will release, but I sat down yesterday and I did a 30-minute podcast with Logan, my youngest, for Five Nights at Freddy's. We watched it together the other day.
Did you now? I saw that in theaters. I was a bit let down by it overall.
Well, I won't share all my thoughts, but I have no previous experience with the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise other than seeing toys and video games and wondering if it was for children. So I didn't have very little experience with that.
I think back to that one day at your son's birthday party. I don't remember which son it was. One of the neighborhood boys got him a Five Nights at Freddy game. Remember that?
I kind of remember it. It wasn't a video game. It would have been
but the funny thing was when everybody at the party wanted to get the Five Nights at Freddy's package open and play the game, board game or one of those like a portable ring toss, the kid that brought it said, no, I don't play those kind of games.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about that.
One little trivia for Five Nights at Freddy's that I found when I was researching that movie just a little bit, to mostly understand what the franchise was the guy who created that, whose name escapes me right now.
Fitchner,
he had made a Christian game. I don't remember. But anyways, he made some kind of Christian game.
Mm-hmm.
And he got critiques for it because the character in it looked like a weird, scary-ish animatronic. So it was like unintentionally freakish.
Yeah.
So he took the criticism and he ran with it. He made Five Nights at Freddy's. So kudos to him.
It became it's an empire somehow.
Yeah, onward and upward, man. But anyways, for the loyal listeners of the podcast, you'll get to hear my kid soon. probably about 8 weeks before this one actually comes out. So
Huh.
I'll probably move it to the front of the line.
Fascinating.
It'd be a pretty quick edit. It's pretty good. The other two, I don't know about the other two for a podcast. So Logan's very well spoken with his theater background.
He is a theatrical kid. Give him that much. You know who else is a theatrical kid? Peter Cushing. No doubt about it.
Peter Cushing, man. What percentage of the population that likes Star Wars does not realize that Peter Cushing did all these films for Hammer Film Productions?
I'd say back when Star Wars came out, most of the people who like Star Wars would have also liked Hammer horror films. But living in 2024, living in 2024, I'm going to say that number is less than 25%.
I think you're being way too optimistic.
I probably am.
Because I don't know. For whatever reason, and these movies were popular, for whatever reason, they're kind of forgotten to history. And maybe it's because the film studio itself is kind of gone AWOL, although they have I guess you could say they've come back a little bit. But whereas Universal never really faded to the background, so you always had that nostalgia factor going.
And Universal understood there was money to be made in licensing their monsters and their particular trademark licenses. Whereas with the Hammer films, the American rights, I think, are tied up with a lot of different studios. Is that correct?
I think so. And I was not aware of this, but it looks like they had some kind of distribution partnership with all these companies. I actually had the list: United Artists, Warner Brothers, Universal, Columbia, Paramount, 20th Century, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, American International Pictures, and 7 Art Productions. Now, I don't know how many each one had. But I didn't realize that. I didn't realize they didn't just distribute their own stuff, honestly. But yeah, what do you know?
My gut feeling is that if it was named after a monster that was familiarly associated with Universal, Universal probably got most of those distribution rights. But Curse of Frankenstein, the first in the Hammer Frankenstein series, appears to be a Warner Brothers print, and every version of it I've tried to watch has looked less than pristine in its preservation quality.
Yeah, so 2 thoughts on that. One is, this is probably not very surprising, since it was their first one based on a creature that was in Universal, as they went out of their way to make sure they did not step on any copyrights that was from the Universal films. Because Universal basically threatened them on the front end. We're going to sue you. If there's anything at all we can sue you for. So that was interesting.
Universal's always been litigious, and it took a big monkey in Nintendo to finally get them off their high horse.
Yeah. So the other thing was, which version of the movie did you watch? Like, what was your media form?
So I have a very cheap-looking double feature DVD that I bought for $2 or $3 at Dollar General store many years ago. I believe it has Taste the Blood of Dracula as feature number 2. And when I bought it, I don't think I knew anything about the Hammer film continuity. I just thought it was some ridiculous knockoff or a cheap cash-in. And I have that double feature. I was able to do the digital disc $2 conversion via Vudu. And so I've tried to watch the digital streams that are on Vudu and Movies Anywhere, but both of them look about the same in quality.
Okay. So was your DVD, is it like pre-2000 or right around there?
I assume it's after 2000. It's not in those little flip cases with the latch.
Okay.
It's
so I got the 2-disc special edition. I got the nice Blu-ray. And I'm not sure what year the scans were based off of. But the one I have was based off from remastered 4K scans.
Oh, there you go.
And it actually had 3 different, what's the word? Basically, it has widescreen, full screen, and an open matte version, which is 1.37 to 1. Almost as, format, there we go. But so basically, there's one on the special features. I guess based off the old television set, this was what would have been broadcast. And it's almost
That's pretty
square.
Cool. Did Shout Factory put that out? Cool. Or Scream Factory?
No, this was Warner Brothers. 2020. So this is pretty new.
Huh. News to me.
There was a few special features where they had some short documentary type stuff that showed what I assume is probably the quality of the version that you watched. But this was pretty good. It was pretty good screen. Now I think the disc was probably $15. It wasn't real expensive, so I definitely recommend it. If someone doesn't own it, get the. I don't think so.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know what might have been cut. Some of the blood, maybe.
So I did read that on the open matte version, or the TV, we'll call it the TV version, that at one point they had lost the scans to the eyeball where they zoom in, and that did get restored for this version. But I don't think it was ever lost from like the widescreen. That's my understanding, at least.
Mm.
But yeah, this movie was a success for Hammer Films. The budget was, I'm looking at probably the equivalent of about $270,000. Which, if you watch the film, you definitely can tell they didn't break the bank for this. And then,
no,
but they did break the bank on the output. So they got made about $8 million on it. So big success. Obviously, spawned a whole bunch of other movies. For those who aren't aware,
were any of these actors considered name actors in 1958?
Well, Peter Cushing was a star from television. I don't think he had done much film at this point. I saw a real cool interview with him. I think it was from, let me see here. Pull up that tab. I won't play it because it's not going to play right on the speakers. But this is from 1973 with BBC. And it's a pretty good little short clip. And he was arguing, basically, he didn't feel like he was a horror movie person. He felt horror films that were really like films about war and more like tragic events. So he considered this more of a fantasy genre.
Or a thriller? Is it a fantasy thriller? Something like that?
He used the word fantasy. I don't know they really had the word thriller back in the 1970s.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe Psycho invented that in 1961.
Yeah, but I think the idea also was, it's fantasy creatures. It's not like it's not realistic. Whereas horror would be
stuff that can
like
really...
you can make the case.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you've even watched it, but like the original Halloween movie, before they got all the supernatural stuff into the mythology, he would probably consider that more of a genuine horror as opposed to fantasy, because it's all realistic.
Okay. Like, he didn't get hit by a truck and live or anything in that? So.
No, I mean, you had the suspense, suspense and disbelief, but it was more of like a psychological thriller / murder thing.
All right.
Later on, that all changed, but for the original. But yeah, the Psycho movie, you'd probably call that a horror. Yeah. So it was really, was really one of Peter's, as far as I know, was really his kind of his foray into the films. And I think from what I understand from the documentary I watched, they needed to get an actor to release this in America. They did not want a straight up British actor with a thick accent for the American release, because they knew the American release needed to be successful. But the American actors were going to be too expensive, and they felt like Peter Cushing was popular enough and honestly just good enough from his TV show stuff that he could pull it off, and obviously he did.
I wonder if anybody thought this would launch a franchise of movies.
I don't think so, based off the ending. But you can talk about that a little bit.
It's a great ending, too.
It is. It really is. It's one of the Christopher Lee had had some smaller roles in films, but I don't know if he would have been considered, name brand actor. And then basically Peter Cushing played this role with a loose continuity, I'll call it, for, was it 6 more films? Is that right? For in terms of Frankenstein?
See, there's one of the Hammer Frankenstein movies that he is not in. They tried a soft or maybe it's a hard reboot, I guess. But he's in all but that one.
Okay, yeah. Now, I want to say that there's 7 Frankenstein movies total, and he's in 6 of them. And he played in other roles in the Hammer films too. But yeah.
Oh yeah, he was notable as Van Helsing. But
yes, yeah. I think he had an equal number of roles in those. And then Christopher Lee was no longer Frankenstein's monster in the other films, but he was obviously in a bunch of other the Hammer stuff also. He's like 6'4", definitely stands out. But I would say loose continuity. I've seen the first 3. I think the first 2 are pretty much straight continuity. Then it gets a little muddy in the third, but yeah.
So about the other actors in the film here, we have Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. They really make this go. I guess we would say, as far as human characters, there are three or four more characters who factor heavily as adults in the film, and then we have young Frankenstein, which I really liked little Melvin or whatever his name is, who plays young Frankenstein. I like
Yeah.
how he plays
So
it, even though it wasn't near as popular then. He's young Bruce Wayne in Wayne Manor, but he takes a very different approach to inheriting the fortune of his parents.
Yeah, he reminds me of the creepy kid in Gotham a little bit. Very odd.
Wait, which one?
Odd. The TV show. I only watched the first couple seasons.
No, I meant which kid in Gotham?
Oh, Bruce.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, I can see that.
You could say Paul is his Alfred, so to speak. But no, definitely odd dynamic there. Now, I would say that there's four main human characters. So I'll be interested to know who else you include. But you have Elizabeth, which is Victor Frankenstein's cousin and fiance. Interesting to parse that out.
First cousin, I think.
Yeah.
Didn't she?
I don't know if that was normal back then. I assume it was, but
It was in the 1818 novel, but I understand that in revisions of it, it was changed to make them a little bit more distant relation, if at all, relation.
Yeah. You have Paul Krempe, who is Victor's tutor, who is introduced in that first scene you were talking about, or the early scene where you have young Victor. I would say those are the four main human characters.
I was never sure how they pronounced his name. I know how it's spelled, but I was never sure how to hear it. I always heard Krempe when everybody said his name in this movie.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the way it's printed, and I agree with you. I couldn't quite figure that out. I don't know where they get the at, though, because there's no R. It's Krempe. Yeah, but he's Paul. The start of the movie, because just so we get out of the way, is the movie's bookended by Victor Frankenstein in jail. And in the first end of it, he's looking a little disheveled, and he's wanting to talk to a priest because he wants someone to believe his story, and he knows if he can convince the priest, then they might believe his story, because otherwise he's going to be guillotined in an hour.
Yeah, man. That's how they did it in Geneva,
Yeah. So he starts telling the story, and he says, well, I guess the beginnings was when I was a child, and his his mother had died, and he had gotten control of the Frankenstein estate. He was now a baron. And that's where we're first introduced to his aunt Sophia and his cousin Elizabeth. Not much is made there other than just introducing the characters. And then Paul Krempe, Krispy Kreme, I don't know. Paul shows up to basically for a job interview with his father, who Victor has been pretending that he was. But basically, Victor is looking for a tutor that is up to his level of intellect. So we recognize that Paul's a pretty sharp guy if Victor likes him. And after about 2 years of intense study, instead of being a tutor, they're more collaborating. It's a little unclear who's smarter. Victor, obviously,
it's a little unclear who's older by the time Peter Cushing shows up.
Well, that's what I was going to point out. It was a weird aging process. So you got Paul, who I will say that I read that basically Peter Cushing was about 20 years older than the Victor Frankenstein's character was supposed to be, but they didn't care, basically.
Yeah.
Probably a good decision. But so you have young Victor, teenager, turned into middle-aged Victor, and then you have someone who looks like they're probably in their 20s because they got the hair nice and brown, and then basically they just gray his hair and grow a beard. But it's the same actor, so you have a completely different actor for Victor, and they age Paul, but you would think it's probably about 10 years. They never say how big of a time gap they're supposed to be, but you think 5 to 10. So Victor has aged very poorly. He must be a chain smoker, drinking the worst quality alcohol.
The mania will age you quicker.
Yeah. But he's found the British meth. I don't know. He's aged poorly. They never show little young Victor anymore, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, it's definitely an awkward aging process.
So the little girl who plays young Elizabeth is the daughter of the actress who plays old Elizabeth. Did you know that?
I didn't, but it's not surprising.
It's
It's
cute.
around child labor laws.
What's the name of the actress who does Elizabeth, adult Elizabeth?
The older one is Hazel Court.
That's not. I kind of like the sound of that, Hazel Court. It sounds like a road where you would live on, something like that.
Yeah, I wonder if it was a real name. If it was I wonder if they did stage names back then.
Likely, possible. Man.
And then Paul Krispy Krempe. His actor's name is Robert Urgort. His last name is just as unpronounceable in real life as it is on the film. It's Urguhart. It might actually be a Q. I'm not sure. But yeah.
Kremper.
Krispy Kreme. But anyways, all these actors do a great job.
I wanted to point out the other significant adult actor in the film. I guess you'd possibly say there are two more who play a pivotal role to the story. One is Professor Bernheim. Is that what his name is? I don't know the actor's name.
I think so.
Supposedly
Bernstein.
the smartest
Professor
man. Bernstein. Like Frankenstein. How about that? Huh. And
I think there's a lot of Steins.
Then you have Justine, the lusty maid.
So I don't know if I call Bernstein a major character, but Justine's
his brain,
borderline.
man.
But
his brain. It's essential.
But he's a minor. That's fine.
But his brain.
I'll give you that. So they start and they're showing some collaborating experiments. Very colorful lab. I like the way they took advantage, or they really knew they wanted to make it pop with the color film. Lots of vats of chemicals of various colors, lots of springs, humming noises. I liked it.
It's always been my favorite part of science fiction movies, the elaborate mad science labs, where it looks like everything is so unnecessary or overly complex for what it actually needs to achieve. But I guess if we are to assume this movie is set sometime in the early to mid 1800s, there's a little line about over 100 years ago, then the focus here is they need to create electricity. They can't just plug something in the wall. They have to use steam or hydropower to generate that electric current. And I guess that's the reason why it's always more fun to watch a science fiction movie that's based on a sort of Victorian era sensibility.
Yeah, my favorite's always, how you have the liquid going through the tubes and like you're moving it from one container to the next, which is about like 2 feet away, but there's about 12 feet of tube it has to funnel through to get there.
And it's always looped
nice
too, so you got to watch it go through the loops.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So their first experiment is they bring a puppy dog back to life. And you think to yourself, oh, what a wonderful world. It's amazing.
Pretty good achievement.
It is. Absolutely. And Paul, like after that, he's like, man, we could save people's lives during surgeries because there was a slight delay in the heart beating. And then, as the blood circulate through the system, so like, we can save thousands and thousands in surgeries. And Victor's like, what? We ain't taking this to the public yet. We're going to create life from a dead body. And already Paul's starting to think to himself, I don't know this is a good idea.
I would critique Dr. Frankenstein on this point, because ultimately his grand ambition is really just a less impressive version of what he's already done, to bring something that is recently deceased back to life. Now he's trying to take something that is long since deceased, even mix a bunch of parts that don't mix together, and reanimate a corpse. I don't feel like it's, in essence, substantially different, because he's not doing what he proposed to do, which is to actually create. It is not a creation ex nihilo by any means. It's really just a corrupted version of what he did to that puppy. Not near as fun of results, but that's a lot different from the book too. He sort of has the opposite motivation in the book, but go ahead.
Well, I had two thoughts what you said. One is they never show this puppy again, and I always wondered, it's like, do we get a little Cujo going on here later? Like, is this puppy actually not corrupted? We don't know how long it had been dead. They probably
If the
killed it and then
movie
brought it back to
if
life
the movie
immediately.
was more modern or made in America, we would have had that scene in the movie, the foreshadowing after the puppy gets corroded or whatever.
Yeah. Sidebar: I read today in The Wolfman when Cheney's character is wrestling with the wolf. It was actually his German Shepherd.
Yes. Yeah.
He was playing with his German Shepherd. Sorry, as a sidebar.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the other thing too, though, is his motivation seems to be, like you say, it changed a little bit, but he wants to make the perfect man. With
He doesn't do that.
basically an athlete with a scientist mind. But that was his
He
initial
doesn't.
goal.
Yeah.
And I will say he does. So Paul's a pushover, by the way.
Mm.
Like, I can't decide if he's just got no spine or if he just wants to creep on Elizabeth for a while.
And then he's a weasel at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as a sidebar, Elizabeth moves into the house. And we also find out that Frankenstein is screwing the maid.
We had
And leading her on.
no idea he had such desires. We thought he was only married to his science, but no, he had other needs, I suppose.
Yeah. And it's never really explained why he's motivated to marry Elizabeth. They had some kind of pen pal thing going on. There may have been a promise to his aunt, but it's
Joe.
not.
Betrothal.
Yeah. They definitely become more friendly as the movie goes on. There's never any inclination that he wants to get romantic with her, but they're definitely more friendly. But it's almost like, is he just doing this to be a status figure, so that he would appear to be married? They never really fleshed that out, but she likes him.
I think Aunt Sophie had a prior understanding with Victor's mother, is the implication here. But Victor doesn't want to think much of it.
But it also doesn't seem like Victor has any desire to not go through with it. He really is going to marry the girl.
Yeah,
so it's
marriage is not.
It's just odd.
It's not about the love here. It is about the social status. Not to say there isn't affection between the two, but
well, and you do wonder in his mind, after he gets married, he does imply that he would like to bring eventually Elizabeth into his experiments, and so it may just be the case where he's holding out to make sure it works out. I don't know. It's odd. It's a sidebar. It doesn't. It's not really key to the plot, other than it keeps Paul around because he keeps freaking out around Elizabeth. You need to leave. Why? I can't tell you. Why? Because I can't tell you. But you need to leave.
You're just a woman. You wouldn't understand.
I know you have all these nice meals with Victor, but he's crazy. It's just like he
is that.
He's definitely semi unhinged in many of these scenes.
Yeah. I'll see you at dinner. When he first greets her. We'll see you at dinner.
So he talks Paul into the shenanigans. They go and they steal a body that's been hanging for a few days as an example, because he was, I guess, terrorizing a town. They have to replace the brain. But prior to the brain, the whole head actually. So he cuts the head off and throws it in a vat of acid. And then he says, "Let's go eat. I'm hungry."
That was the moment where Paul got his first real moment of questioning. He was hesitant, but went along with everything right up until that point when Victor pulls the knife out and starts to cut it like the cheese.
Yeah. Well, I guess he thought, no harm, no foul. This body's just hanging to rot anyways.
Yeah.
So at this point, but
I
think he realizes that there is more work that's going to be coming along once you start cutting off body parts and replacing them.
Yep.
But Victor recognizes also that the hands are the hands of an oaf. So he gets an idea. Says, "Bye, Paul." He goes and buys a pair of hands of the finest quality, which freaks Paul out quite a bit.
I want to know if he put an ad in the paper or something. It was coded to how Victor has that underworld pegged for.
Yeah.
I know a guy. Really? How do you get into that market?
Yeah. And then he goes and he buys some eyeballs. I think that's now, isn't it? It's a little unclear why he needed the eyes.
Well, he got rid of the head, so now there was a statement.
Was he going to piece together this thing?
When he pulled the corpse down, he mentioned the eyes are the first thing to go. So I'm not sure how, let's just say when Dr. Bernstein made himself available, if he could harvest the brain, would it have been a problem to also get the eyes? But whatever.
I don't know.
Victor's
I got my
monster,
notes.
not
He bought
mine.
the eyes first, so it's a little unclear. I mean, it does explain why the monster has two different color eyes, but it does not explain how he needed to have two different color eyes. But I don't know. So he buys some eyeballs, finest quality for $10, or 10
Yeah.
somethings at least, 10 coins. And then he's like, okay, I need the brain. So they go to a scene with Professor Bernstein, a very old but allegedly the most intelligent person in Europe. And the professor gives him a nice little speech that basically tells him all the reasons why he's a bad person. And all his goals are wrong. And then Paul shows up, surprises everybody. Bernstein goes to bed. Victor follows him, shows him a painting, says, oh, you should back up a little bit, get a nice review. And then screams, oh no, don't fall. And as he pushes him over the ledge and kills him.
I find another problem with Victor's plan here. I suppose I'm going to go down a dark road myself here, but if your interest in the man is the brain, why would you risk a head injury?
I don't know. I guess he got a splinter in the eye.
Shouldn't he
That's
have
where he needed
poisoned the
eyes.
man? Or found some way to do it more quietly?
Well, he had to make it look like an accident.
Yeah,
But
well, he's old. He could have died for any reason in his sleep. Pillow suffocation?
I don't know. Well, I don't know. So I don't know why there was not an investigation into this, but there apparently wasn't, even by Paul, who had to know what was going on, but he skipped
One
through
thing
it.
I'd like to
And
point
then,
out in this movie is that immediately before the dinner with Bernstein, he's having a conversation with Paul, and he makes a comment of, I'm doing nothing wrong, I'm not hurting anybody. And it's immediately followed up with the step back to have a better look at the portrait scene.
oh, well, and also I should point out, he has a scene there where he's basically saying he's going to get the finest brain. Man, I need a good brain. And I keep to myself, I'm Paul. I'm getting out of there.
Oh, the way he looks at him. When Cushing he
Yeah.
stares at him with wanting gaze.
Like, you ain't going to help me get a nice brain? I'll take yours. That's the vibe I was getting from that scene. Though it was
That's
never
what I
acted
thought
on.
would happen. But yeah, I thought it was going to go that way the first time. Even the second time I watched this movie, I said, oh. No, he
I
does
was
get the
reminded
old
of
man.
just how uncomfortable that had to feel. But yeah, so he apparently Bernstein didn't have a lot of family, so he allows them to be in his family tomb.
Yeah.
So later that night after the funeral, he goes in and he removes the brain, puts it in a nice jar, and of course Paul shows up. Like, what are you doing? I thought I'd find you here.
Who do you think he got the head from? Is that a plot hole?
You know, actually, so I think we solved our plot hole. I think this may be it's not the original head. I mean, I don't know.
He
They
put
don't
it in
really
acid,
show that.
the whole thing. The whole thing's in acid.
I hadn't thought about that. I had not put two and two together.
He might have had a guy for a skull. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that explains the eyeball thing. Guess he'd already gotten a head off the black market.
Yeah.
They really should have shown that, though. So anyways, Paul confronts him, and in the process, the bag, or there's a bag that has the brain in it. It gets swung against the wall, and the glass jar explodes. And Paul's ran off, and then Victor goes takes what's left of the brain, goes and plucks out some of the dirt, and puts it in the monster.
Good old
All's
Victor.
well.
He is undeterred. You know what? That guy doesn't
Let's
quit.
fix it later.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if the brain surgeons back then really did think they could just noodle around in someone's brain and fix the problem.
Lobotomies. Yeah, you got to remove the bad parts of the brain. Just cut it off.
Yeah. And then around this time, Paul again goes into Elizabeth's bedroom while she's in her nightgown and yells at her to leave again. That went well.
Yeah, man.
She trusts Victor.
It's a bit sad how much she trusts her cousin. She just won't believe anything bad about him.
Yeah, I mean, she's really she's been wanting to be kissing cousins for 20 years.
We'll say 10, right? Probably. Probably about 10.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. She's older than that too, so it's a little unclear.
Mm.
So then Victor tries to get the body alive, realizes that the contraption is kind of difficult to handle with one person, leaves to go beg Paul to help, which really ends up being pointless because lightning strikes. It turns on. It's a little odd scene. But anyways, it completes the process, and the monster awakens.
What was your impression about how the mechanism worked when you have a body that is submerged in some kind of liquid? Is the idea that you turn the wheel to generate the hydroelectricity, and then the water drains so that when the heart begins to beat, it won't drown? You think that's the logic to it?
I guess I thought it was kind of weird the way it played out. It was visually cool to look at. So you got all
Oh,
these
it's great.
contraptions going off, and then it's not working, or he doesn't think it's working. So he turns it off and drains the machine. I don't know if he drained it on purpose, because I don't know why he would have. But as it's being drained, lightning strikes. But by the time lightning strikes, the water's all drained.
Right.
And
So
a few doohickeys bounce around, but it's almost as if it had worked and he hadn't realized it. But then why do you have the lightning strike to turn it all back
because
on?
you would
So I don't
think
know. It was odd.
the water would be necessary to jolt the body when the lightning would get into the
Yeah.
water there,
And
and
they never show any kind of visual effect of a jolt either,
budget
other than
maybe.
just the lightning strike and then the machine, the wheel spinning. But I don't know. It was interesting, but I don't know if it was executed. It wouldn't. I don't know. It was pretty cool.
So the gentlemen go upstairs. For some reason, it's interesting. Paul can't quit Victor. I guess it's because of Elizabeth, but he keeps coming back to him in the. Oh, I gotta mention the way Cushing says it. My laboratory. I love that. Laboratory. If you're conceited, you got to call it a laboratory.
Yeah, so they go up there and the monster, I think it escaped, right? Yeah, it escaped, went out the window, and they go chase
The
it.
window. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Oh yeah. It's out on the countryside. Sure. Yeah, they have a hunt for this thing.
Because their goal is to catch it before it gets to the woods, because they know it's going to be a more complicated chase.
Too
and they
late.
fail on that. It gets in the woods. And so in the Universal film, you have the monster going to this sweet girl at the lake. And through a misunderstanding, he picks her up and throws her into the lake.
Because Universal Frankie is not a bad guy. We got to establish that.
Well, no, he's more not that. There's a naivety. He thinks the girl wants him to throw her in the lake.
Yeah.
So you needed something similar in this movie. Kind of their parallel scene is you have this old blind grandpa and his
that's in the book.
His grandson. So the blind guy sits down on a stump, and the kid goes to collect rocks, literally at the lake. And Frankenstein wanders up, or the creature wanders up, and the old guy realizes that something ain't right. And he semi-threatens the monster with a cane. It's a little unclear whether or not he would have got killed had he not done
walking
that.
Stick.
It's not
pretty lame cane.
Yeah, walking stick. Yeah, so it's a little unclear what would have happened, but he felt threatened enough. The monster takes the stick, snaps it in half, and it's implied that he kills him, strangles him. And then the little kid hears the screaming, I think, and runs back looking for the old man. And you're wondering, did the little kid get it? So a few minutes after that, Paul and Victor, they wander into the scene. I guess it's easy to follow the dude's trail. He's snapping stuff as he walks because his arms are flailing around. And I can't remember if they see the little sack, but they show on the ground the kid's little knapsack thing.
The whole plot thread doesn't really go anywhere, that he killed an old man and the boy.
No, I think they're just paying tribute to in their own little way, I think, to Universal film in that scene.
All right.
I don't know. And that he is a dangerous creature, on purpose or not.
See, I'd like to point out there is no angry mob in this movie, which you usually associate with any iconic monster film, especially Frankenstein.
Yeah, my understanding was they didn't have the budget.
No extras, huh? Oh
No.
well.
So, a pretty anticlimactic scene. The creature starts wandering up to them, and Paul shoots it in the head.
Headshot. He knew how to go with that. Go for the head.
He is hell bent on damaging that brain.
Beyond what it already
As
was, I
Vic-
guess. What's
yeah,
left to
as
damage?
Victor continually reminds him, like, why do you keep killing that brain? This is your fault that it's mindless. And he ain't wrong.
Nah.
He ain't wrong necessarily on that part. How we got there is different, avenue. But
Does this
so,
scene get followed immediately by a burial? I was a bit confused on the placement of what happened to the body of the monster.
well, they find out that Victor never actually called for the villagers to come, so they were not in a rush to get rid of the body. So they were able to leisurely bury it by the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Now, based off what we know happens, I'm surprised that Victor was not in more of a hurry. And Victor is, I think he kind of knows that the creature's going to get killed and he's got to fix it. Probably wasn't hoping for the headshot. But, so after he buries it and says, well, it's over, you win, but I'll never forgive you. They shoot later, but we later find out that Victor stuck around, dug the body back up. And I don't know if he drug it or what, but he got it back to his lab.
Yeah, I was curious how he managed that, but whatever. He's a genius. I'm not here to critique his genius, only his motivation.
Well, I will critique his frame. Peter Cushing is a wiry little lad, and this is a 6'4" Christopher Lee, probably 250, 260 pounds. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's a good question.
Anyways, so here, I think this is when the mistress comes back. I think around here there's a mistress scene. Yeah, Justine. Yeah, but I guess she's not the sharpest tool. She's just now figured out that Victor's going to marry Elizabeth.
You promised yourself to me, Victor. Oh.
Yeah. So she claims that she's pregnant. I don't think he quite believes her, but she claims it. Says, well, you should just go find somebody in town who wants to be the father. I'm sure you'll pick right.
Because he's suggesting nobody will believe it's mine. They'll just assume you've been promiscuous.
And then she threatens to tell the authorities about his experiments. And he's like, what experiments? She's like, the ones you're doing. Like, what do you mean? What do you know? I know that I know what I know. You want to know what I know? What do you know? There's no evidence. I'll get evidence. And it's like, he's basically calling her bluff. I'm like, you don't know what I'm doing. So then as soon as he closes shop, she sneaks from her little bedroom thing up there, runs in. Victor's not the stupidest guy. He knew what she was going to do. She basically said, because he told her she had to be out by morning. So she had one night to get the evidence. So he locks her in the room, and the monster gets her. I guess
so it's
recovered
ironic.
enough.
Dr. Frankenstein had the key to her heart all along.
Literally and figuratively. And
my assumption is the reason Frankenstein is in jail is because the deaths of the maid, not anything else.
Yes, I think I forget where that was. I think it's at the end that they pointed that out. What I don't understand is why he didn't drop her into the acid. Like, why is there a
We don't
body?
know that he didn't, do we? We don't see the body. Huh.
Well, I mean,
it's unexplained.
How do they even know she's dead? Because in the story, they say she's been gone for a week, or she must have run off with somebody. There's got to be some evidence, but it's unclear where it would come from.
Well. Good question.
So, at this point, we kind of think this is where we jump into the marriage eve party, I want to say. And we find that Elizabeth has invited Paul to the wedding.
Yeah.
And Victor was not immediately thrilled, but yeah. So at some point, everyone leaves and Victor goes back to work. She's pretty disappointed with that. And then Paul shows up and says, oh, Victor wanted to show you something. He goes up the stairs. And we see Victor making his dog food for his monster.
Ugh.
Or it was pretty disgusting stuff. Even Harley's offended. You can hear her. They get into a fight over the monster.
Yeah. Paul
Yeah, and
shoves
Paul
him. He
says, "I'm
says
going
he's
to go
going to
tell
go
the
tell the
authorities."
police. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the one time he doesn't argue with Elizabeth, but just keeps going. And then Victor
He leaves the
recovers
door
and
open.
chases him out of the room. Yeah, and then Elizabeth's like, "All right, I'm tired of this crap. Like, what's going on?" She goes upstairs and bumbles around and gets a lamp so she can see what's going on. And the creature had freed himself from the wall because he was chained to a wood wall that looked like it had been chewed up by termites. So it wasn't that hard to remove the metal from the wall.
Wonder if Victor used chrome steel to hold him down.
So then we go back to the roof. The monster gets onto the roof. Elizabeth hears a noise and follows, but never actually sees the monster. I don't know if she ever actually sees the monster.
You
And
might
then
be
at
right
some
about
point, the
that.
monster comes up behind her and grabs her.
She's never
It's a little
afraid
unclear
at the
whether or
sight
not
of
she
him.
ever saw him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then while that's all going on, Victor, so they when they're arguing, they see the monster up on the roof. So Paul's like, "I'm going to town. I ain't getting in this at the end." And Victor runs back, and his spry self is not an endurance runner. That's for sure. Peter Cushing
It's a little bit curious
is
what
stuck in the
Elizabeth.
wind.
You know, she's in her nice gown. She goes out on the roof at night. I guess she's just really curious. More curious than anything. She's got to know what this is.
Yeah, what is tearing my two men apart? The one that doesn't like me that I'm marrying, and the one that likes me that I keep calling and say, "Come visit."
Oh, yes.
So, anyways, Victor shows up with a gun, and Barney Fifes the situation and shoots her in the shoulder instead of hitting the monster.
No
She
blood,
passes
though.
out.
So, yeah, she
Yeah.
faints because of. I guess she gets hit. We don't see any bandages on her in the end of the movie, but she's not wearing any kind of exposed shoulder dress at the ending scene.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if for some weird reason the censors got it too much into that. I'm not sure.
Maybe.
But yeah. So then he doesn't really have any more bullets. He's Barney. He's literally got one bullet. And then so he throws the lamp at him. Yeah. He throws the oil lamp at the monster, and it goes up in flames, and it falls through the roof and into the vat of acid. And he's created his monster, and now he has destroyed his monster.
And he's in jail.
So they don't really show what happens there, but they go back. This is where the book ended, the jail scene, and he finishes his story to the priest. I don't think the priest even has much time to respond, and Paul and Elizabeth show up. And
well,
you want to take
Elizabeth
it from here?
doesn't go to see him. She's with Paul, but Paul is the only one who's going in to visit him.
Yeah. And then Paul walks in. Victor gives him a hug and says, "Oh, you know what happened. You were the only the other person to see it." Which again implies that Elizabeth never actually knew what was going on. And then Paul just walks off. See ya.
He gives that Jim Halpert hamming look to the camera every time Victor talks about the monster, as if he's just saying, "Monster? This man is raving."
Yeah.
And so when he gets to poor Elizabeth is still concerned about the welfare of Victor. And Paul says, he's terrible. We can no longer help him. As if it's some mental illness that now we just have to put him down like a diseased animal with rabies.
Yeah, he comes across like he did vouch for the guy, and that there's no way he could have done this. In reality, he's just laughing at him, like, "I got the girl," and the girl doesn't even know better.
Man, who's the real monster in this movie? I ask you.
All the humans, for the most part.
Elizabeth
is probably the only character who's actually good.
Yeah,
and the dead professor too, of course. But
poor Dr.
So they
Bernstein.
drag Victor off. Yeah, so they drag Victor off to the guillotine, and the credits roll with them raising the guillotine, preparing to take the head off of Victor Frankenstein.
I have one of those.
You think you're?
I guess you call a Mandela effect. I always thought the movie ended with the guillotine dropping, but it did not when I watched it this time.
Yeah, So when I watched it the first time, I knew that were going to be sequels with him in it, and I was under the impression that they were relatively connected on continuity. So I'm thinking to myself, they've kind of written themselves into a box. I'll be very curious to see how they get him out of this.
Yep, they
We'll find
do.
out next time on that.
They do. He needs a
But
lackey.
yeah.
Is what he needs to help him get out of this. Well, we can
Go
talk
ahead.
about this later. This particular film, Curse of Frankenstein, do you believe this is a great monster movie or something that sets up for later?
So I've seen the first 3 of these Frankenstein movies. I haven't seen the last 3 or 4. I think this was the best of the 3 I saw. I think this is a great movie. Minor plot holes aside, I think it's a great film. It's definitely this is the equivalent of Iron Man. Like, they're setting themselves up and don't even realize it. But I just think the movie holds up real well. I think Christopher Lee, the British press did not give good reviews to this movie. The Americans loved it. So, I think, it's got Peter Cushing in it. What can you say? He makes this movie.
I don't think there's ever been a better Dr. Frankenstein than Peter Cushing, because I can't tell you who played him in any other movie, but probably Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, you can't compare that one.
No.
But they have a similar look.
Yeah. Maybe it was modeled after Cushing's tradition.
Might have been.
Hammer
I think
tradition.
Christopher Lee looks good. I think they were hamstrung a little bit on his makeup because they had to be very specific and not pulling anything from the Universal film.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be curious to know if they had a blank slate, how they would have designed Christopher Lee. Because if you could have taken the Universal Frankenstein model and thrown him into this movie, I think you'd have to make it a little more grotesque, but I think it would have worked pretty good. And I think it's a great movie. I think it inspired a lot of people too. It's been lost today, but I think the people that were making the horror films in the 80s, I think there were films like this. Like, you think of like the slasher films, and you have the Voorhees or the Michael Myers creeping monster. It really does fit Frankenstein's mold.
Yeah. I guess my critique of this movie would be that the ending is anticlimactic. You used that word before about a different scene, but maybe it's just my love of spectacle and the realities of a hand-strung budget.
Yeah,
Just
like this would have been. I did read they would have done some things different had they had more budget. Like, I think they would have had a mob scene.
Yeah, fire.
I think the
like
scene.
that, maybe.
I think the scene. Yeah, there was no fire. I think the scene in the woods would have been a little more climactic. Maybe the monster. That one should have been a little more climatic, anyways. And then the ending. I like the ending. It's got that creepy, like, twist kind of thing at the end. So I don't know. It wasn't much of a fight scene, but Victor can't really get into a fight scene.
Nah.
120 pounds. There's no
Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee could. They say one thing that Peter Cushing was really great about on sets is his fascination with grabbing props as he did his acting. And in some cases, that would translate to an action or fight scene, but that might be more in some of the future movies than this one here.
Yeah. So that reminds me, I read that he got trained by a surgeon so he would properly be holding the scalpel for the scenes where he's cutting stuff. He wanted it to look realistic. I
think one of my low-key favorite moments of this movie, as regards Peter Cushing's physical acting, is when they're reviving the puppy, and Paul is trying to reach in after they take the box away, and Victor slaps his hand, and he goes for his own. I don't know if they call it the stethoscope, where doctors try to listen for a heartbeat. I don't know if that was in the script, but Cushing played that so well, of just how this was his project. He's going to be the one to listen for the first signs of life.
Yeah. Frankenstein, is he a villain? He's obviously not a hero. Is he a villain or just a misunderstood, misguided man? He's
evil, man. He is I use the word mania. He is a maniac, as in he is completely enamored to an unfailing capacity, his belief in what he's doing. So he definitely is a protagonist, that this is his story. He's like Thanos in the Infinity Stones. He has to do it. He has to have it for himself, in his mind, for all mankind, to accomplish something. But this is not a good guy. He's a hypocrite, because even in this movie, when we go from the I'm not hurting anybody to pushing Dr. Bernstein off the ledge. And there's that line at the end of the movie where I'm not quite sure how to interpret it, when Paul says he's going to the police and they're arguing outside the castle, where he says, if you do this, Elizabeth will be the first one to suffer. So you're not quite sure what he means by that. That's pretty dark.
The first scene where he's a kid, he doesn't come across as evil, but he definitely comes across as socially inept. And at some point, like every scene, he kind of degrades a little more in terms of his character. And then you have Paul, who appears conflicted throughout the whole film, but ultimately he just wants the girl. It's like, I wasted 15 years hanging out with this Victor dude.
Well, and I'll say it again on why I don't think there's been a better portrayal of Frankenstein. He gets so much joy out of everything he does, be it wicked or whatever. In this movie, he never for a moment doubts that he's doing what he should be doing. And that does make for a great character on screen, even if it's not a hero by any means.
Get done cutting this guy's head off, and all right, I'm hungry, just go eat.
Oh, never that's a great line.
Yeah.
I could eat some food, Paul. Come on.
So let me ask you this. The reputation is that the Universal monster movies were really monster-centric.
Yeah.
And that the Hammer films are more character-driven.
Yeah.
I don't know that if you compare Frankenstein, the original, to Curse of Frankenstein, that holds up.
Well, I would probably be on the side that would say the first two Universal Frankenstein movies are monster-centric.
Now, I will say, I think the character development, they are definitely not as well-developed characters in that movie. I mean, it's 20 years older, too. I mean, it's a lot of reasons for that. But the monster's not really in the movie that much.
Of the Universal films?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the Universal film is a lesser version of this. Like, I think this is a better movie. You can say obviously the monster is infamous in the 30s movie. I get
when
that.
I say monster-centric, I mean more of the movie is shown from the monster's perspective on the world, and I think Bride of Frankenstein might even be more focused on the monster than the prior Universal movie. But it's been a few years since I sat through it. The book tries to give us one third of it from Victor's perspective, the second third of it from the monster's perspective, and then the final third of it back again from Victor's perspective, but also from the perspective of the captain of the boat he's on. I'll say this, it's a high price of entry to the book if you're coming in expecting you're getting anything comparable to the movie. You have a possibly unreliable narrator, and you have multiple narrators. So I would rather watch a Frankenstein movie any day of the week before I'd want to read through Mary Shelley casually, but that's me and my simple desires in life.
Yeah, well, I've always been a fan of horror films, not so much horror books. Like, I enjoy books, horror books have never really done it for me.
It's not a horror book. It's a book that's more about philosophy than science fiction.
True.
So
that's true.
So I'm not sure at what point the Frankenstein movies transitioned into science fiction. I know there was a 1910 silent film, which was the first adaptation of Frankenstein, but the Universal movies really do put the popular perception, not just of what the monster looks like, but what the story is and what the motivation of the characters are. And Hammer takes that, I think, to a little bit less spectacular, but a more refined and mature take on that concept that Universal helped pioneer.
That's fair. I think maybe one way to look at it is, when you say movie versus film, there's almost like a distinction there between like kind of low art and higher art. And
Movie
I think
versus film? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Huh.
like connotations with that. Like
Oh.
snobs like films.
Oh,
Like
yes.
if you're
National
like
Film
like if you
Registry.
like if you're an expert film reviewer, but movie
Quite.
people are just they eat their popcorn,
Indeed,
So maybe
old
if
boy.
you want to use the connotations between that, maybe you would say the Universal movies would be better called movies, and the Hammer ones are more films. Like they're trying to
Yeah, sure.
they got a higher
They're
goal
British.
than just like
They're British.
Yeah, well, and it's like comparing the original Godzilla to the Monster Mash wrestling movies.
All right.
Like,
and at no point do you really pity any of the characters except maybe Elizabeth and Bernstein. You don't really pity Paul, Victor, or the monster in this one.
No, you want to pity Paul, but there's just something about him the entire time that you just like you can't quite put your finger on.
Yeah.
Other than he needs to be protecting his brain.
And he ages unnaturally. Well, I guess Victor ages unnaturally, but
yeah, I think Paul aged kind of nice, but Victor's going to be dead by the time he's 40, just from old age. Maybe that's his motivation. He knows that he's aging quickly. He needs to transfer his brain to something younger soon.
Maybe he volunteered for a lot of the testing of the hydroelectric shocks in their experiments.
You got any closing thoughts, Adam?
It is. I was wondering about that little doggy. It's sad we never got to see it in cameo at any point in the movie.
This movie is fun to watch. If you were born post 2000, you'd still like this movie. Think it was great. So if you're looking at a horror movie from 70 years ago now, that's a pretty high mark. And it's really sad that this movie is 70 years old. Makes me feel old.
Boy, I feel like Captain America just getting sawed out of the ice. How many more years until Universal Frankenstein is public domain? 3 or 4? That'd be fun.
Can't be long. Yeah, it can't be long.
Yeah. It coming.
Could be hanging out with Winnie the Pooh soon.
He's getting a sequel. I just got an email about that today. The Bear is back.
Oh, they got a whole multiverse. Do you see that?
Oh, dear. Isn't he fighting Mickey Mouse or somebody eventually?
Probably. I think the Bambi movie's next, though.
Oh, nobody. That's just a dumb one to try and do a horror movie about.
I'd like to say that I was making a joke, but I don't think I am. I might have it wrong, but I'm pretty sure Bambi.
Bambi versus Godzilla was pretty good. That's all it needs to be. 20 seconds or less. I guess they didn't make any money off it, so that's how they got away with it.
Wasn't worth chasing them. It was on the 1985 VHS tape, though.
I've always wondered how they managed that legally.
I read about it one time. I can't recall now, but yeah.
That's more surprising to me they put it on an official VHS tape than... Because that canonizes it, more or less. But, maybe when we finally talk about... Yeah, okay. Godzilla already has a multiverse now with Bambi. How about that?
Yeah. All right, so which movie's next? I can't remember. What's the name of it?
The Evil. Or is it Revenge or The Evil? The Revenge of Frankenstein, I think, is next.
I think it's The Revenge of Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever one it was, we're going to watch the second one next time. All right. Well, we're pre-editing. We're at an hour 15, so it's time to wrap this thing up.
Woo!
And thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been The Curse of Frankenstein with Peter Cushing. As reviewed by Old Man Winters and Joe Gould. See you guys next time.
Good night.